Hi, I'm Gail Holliday coming to you from Corvallis, Oregon in the bountiful Willamette Valley. Welcome to my show, Valley Views, a forum for sharing relevant topics relating to people and issues in the Willamette region. Hi folks, thanks for joining me today. I have here a woman who has many talents. Her name is Andrea Haverkamp. She is a PhD student in environmental engineering and queer studies at the Oregon State University. She is advancing social justice and gender equity in engineering. She's also the co-organizer for the new Corvallis Tenants United Union, and she's a host of Labor Wave. It's a radical leftist working class podcast in Corvallis. Hi, Andrea. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me and for the very kind words.
Oh, well, kind word, it's actually things that you're doing. So I'm probably going to have you back and talk about all these other things. There's so many interesting projects and areas you're into. But today, I wanted to talk with you a little bit about housing and some of this work that the Corvallis Tenants United Union is doing and why we need it here. So I guess I'll just kick this off by saying I am a Corvallis resident, have been for 5 years now, and I rent, my husband and I rent, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to find rentals here that are affordable, even though we're both working and, on and on, but it's hard to find housing here. What's going on here?
There's so many different factors going on here, one of which is a small amount of landlords dominate the housing market. A second thing, in addition to these few people being able to control and collude on higher prices with little competition, is the fact that here in the Willamette Valley, we're kind of locked between ocean and mountains and hills, which creates a very small area that you can have housing in Corvallis without having people move to Philomath or Albany.
Right.
Another major factor is the university. Along with the university itself expanding every year greater than it agreed to with the city of Corvallis in 2007, Oregon State University attracts a growing number of upper class and upper middle class students as the university system gets more and more expensive. You have a wealth inequality in the university, creating a large number of students whose families are able to foot the bill for ever increasing rent, making poor and lower class students priced out of this area, both in terms of tuition and their housing costs.
Well, I'll tell you, my husband and I are in the boat with those low-income students, I'll tell you what, because we've seen a lot of the condos go up. Some of my friends call them the mushrooms because they call them that, I think, because they go up overnight, it seems. And they're just not very interesting architecture, but they seem to fit about 5 students or so.
Yes.
5 bedrooms they are.
There has been so much of that where I am. I'm south of the stadium, and we are in a little cul-de-sac, but every single housing unit seems to be torn down with brand new, square, just screams gentrified housing popping up over and over. And you can tell what it looks like. The yard, small. The density, packed, but often into little segmented apartments that look very nice and are very expensive and are no longer the family-style homes for families and working families, but instead very individualistic, segmented houses. There's only a couple left in my neighborhood, and I'm still in a building that was built in the 1970s, and no cause eviction is still allowed. So at any moment, they could evict any of us, tear it down, and likely make a lot of money getting rid of the yard and the housing,
absolutely,
and packing people in.
I know in the neighborhood where I was living, it's called the Jana neighborhood, and it's walking distance to the university. And in fact, it's the oldest neighborhood in Corvallis, I'm told. It was the first neighborhood. Job's Edition is what Jana stands for. And whenever a sign goes up that someone's selling their house, the neighbors, I'm told, all beg them please don't sell, sell it to a family at least. Don't make it into apartments. Just please keep it intact, because it's just always such an impact.
And it really changes the demographics of the neighborhood and the
Yes.
livability to have apartments, because parking is another thing that Oregon State University has not been a positive impact on the city with. Oregon State University agreed to not only limit the number of students increasing per year, which has affected our density, but has also had prior agreed to build more parking lots and parking areas and limit the number of vehicles. That has not happened. And so cars are another part of American society in general which need an overhaul, but
Tell
in
me
which
about it.
Corvallis is struggling to pack into these neighborhoods.
Absolutely, yeah. There's just tremendous amount of traffic that comes in and out of Corvallis, and then also
30,000 people a
Yeah,
day.
yeah, 30,000 a day.
That's half the
That's
population
half
of
the
Corvallis
population.
comes into work but cannot afford to live here.
Well, there's been a handful of times I've run into situations, and this was verified, where parents have actually just bought a house for their student.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is ever increasingly common. An uncle of mine who did go to college. I'm a first generation in my parents, but my uncle did go to college. And out there in Kansas, where housing prices are cheaper,
Right.
did buy a house, bought two, one to rent out and one for his daughter when she would go to university in the town. And it's wild to know that, and it is a
Yeah.
growing sign that it's not just the 1% we're fighting up against, but there is a top 20%, those of which who make 3 times the national average in terms of money, and are able to do that.
And I can tell that. I mean, I'm not a car person. I mean, I do own a little, Ford Focus, but when I say I'm not a car person, I'm not into them. I don't know them, but I see some pretty expensive cars around here. I mean, really
It's egregious.
high end. I mean, even I can tell these are high end Jeeps and Mercedes and
Yeah.
these huge SUVs and whatnot. And there's students.
The university system is no longer providing opportunities, but instead is reifying and solidifying the social stratification of
Yes.
income, and you can see it on
Oh, I
our
see
streets
it.
and in our neighborhoods.
Absolutely.
And it's becoming quite outrageous.
It's kind of like in Portland too. I mean, and I know they've had these struggles in Portland, and they've done something about it, which we can get into in a minute or so. I hear people talk about the gentrification that's gone on in the northeast Portland, and you have people with Black Lives Matter signs in their window, but the black people have been gentrified out of it. It's just
Yeah.
the terrible irony of that.
I lived in Southeast for a bit, around 33rd and Division, and just in the half year I was in Portland before starting my PhD here, Division Street had changed so much, where when you're further down on Division, you could see it as a working class neighborhood. I think listeners should remember that $33,000 a year is the median income for a single adult, for one adult in the United States. And so kids are graduating from college, getting their first job at $50,000-$60,000 a year, already
Right.
making almost twice the national average, moving into those neighborhoods and absolutely destroying the livability for what is the working class. $33,000 and under is largely not white, not college educated, is disproportionately already marginalized due to a number of identities.
And don't even talk about cities that are really heavy on the IT workers, because San Francisco, you can't touch it now. You
No.
haven't been able to touch it in a long time.
No,
Yeah.
not at all.
Yeah. Boston's getting that way.
Seattle.
Seattle. Well, Andrea, when we, several weeks ago, there was this nice, like a tenants conference in Corvallis at the Westminster House.
Yes.
Yes, and there was a speaker from Portland who was talking about some innovative things they've done there. And if you want to speak to them
Yeah.
a little bit, some of how they've helped the renters up there.
We had brought a speaker from Portland Tenants United, the tenants union up there in Portland, who has staged many demonstrations, which is one line of action to highlight the injustice and unfairness of landlords who are, on a small scale, absolutely totalitarian in their control over our lives.
Yes.
And when due process does happen, Portland Tenants United has been able to show up to meetings and to the courthouse where there's often no representation, and where often, with just a little bit of that legal understanding, are able to prevent evictions.
Yes.
And they've also been able to do rent strikes and other forms of action that send to landlords the message, you are not increasing our rent, they're moving through various forms of city council, legal channels, advancing politicians in their neighborhoods. And it has inspired a lot of us in Corvallis to say we have allies up north that we can learn from who are making
Absolutely.
really cool progress.
Yes. Okay, well, this has been such fascinating talking here that I'm running out of time. So I'm going to wrap this up and let's continue our conversation in part 2.
That sounds fabulous.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah. You've been listening to Valley Views. I'm your host, Dale Holliday, and I'd love to hear from you. Comments, questions, ideas for future topics, or other matters you would like explored. Email me at valleyviews@kboo.org. That's VALLEYVIEWS@kboo.org. Special thanks to Chad Howard from Corvallis Access Media for his technical assistance and support. I look forward to being with you again next time. And remember, as Doctor Who once said, I'm not in charge, but I'm full of ideas. Bye!